Good afternoon, once again, everybody. My name is Hadley Gamble. I'm the Senior International Correspondent for CNBC and anchor here in the region. Today, we're going to be talking about achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I think that one of the things that we've noticed over the last couple of days with over 3,000 delegates gathered here in Dubai is that it's not just about gender equality, and it's not just about gender parity. It's also about a bigger and more holistic approach to the world. One of the statistics that we've seen repeated again and again is that the World Economic Forum has said that it's going to take over a century to reach gender parity, 108 years to have gender equality globally. How can we move faster? Because that's just not fast enough. I want to introduce my panelists to kick off. His Excellency, Abdulla Lootah, the Director General of the Federal Authority of Competitiveness and Statistics in the UAE. Her Excellency, Shamsa Saleh, the Secretary General of the UAE Gender Balance Council. Zohra Khan, Global Policy Advisor for Governance and National Planning for UN Women. And Taline Koranchelian, almost there, Deputy Director of Middle East and Central Asia for the IMF. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I want to kick off by asking you to take 1 minute or 2 minutes to identify in your mind what you see is the greatest challenge to achieving gender parity. Your Excellency, if you want to kick off.
Thank you very much, Handley, and thank you very much for attending this session. I know it's almost at the end of the forum, so we totally appreciate your presence. I think what we need to think of is actually thinking forward rather than thinking about what stops us from achieving gender equality. We call it here in the UAE gender balance. Equality is something so hard to look at and think of because it's about measuring things. So if we start doing things with calculating the percentages and calculating the work that is being done by male or female, I think we will lose track. But if we do think of balance, this is much easier and I think much appropriate for societies. Each society is unique. We need to think of ourselves as nations with histories, with background. We are trees that are deeply rooted. The roots that we have goes thousands of centuries ago. You cannot take a tree out from its soil, and you cannot just expect the tree to grow and blossom and bloom in another soil.
So it's about finding an organic approach for each country.
It's about finding what's suitable for the nation at the pace that is suitable for that particular society.
Right, and at the same point, moving everybody as quickly forward as possible. And obviously, you're a numbers guy, a statistics guy. So in terms of making those numbers add up, it's not the same in every place. Obviously, Dubai being different from Egypt, Egypt being different from Norway. We have to find a holistic approach. Your Excellency?
I think one of the most important challenges that we are facing globally today is the lack of gender-friendly legislations and legal framework. So we really need to gender mainstream the policies and have the gender lens on the policies. Because, we need to consider the gender and have a gender lens in all across all sectors, all related policies. The other thing is the awareness. Starting from early childhood, we need to change this perception of kids that woman is the housewife and the man is the worker or the staff through our curriculum, books, textbook, education, etc.
The power of influence.
So I think policies and awareness are the main two pillars that we really need to work on.
And when we think about this more broadly, obviously, in order to have these kinds of influence campaigns and to make the numbers add up, you also have to have economics that work. Walk us through the IMF challenge there, Taline.
Thank you, Adley. And let me just take this opportunity to also thank the Global Women's Forum for organizing this very important event over the past 2 days. It wasn't just the challenges and the issues that we have heard, but also very interesting, inspiring stories and the passion of women and their dedication to advance this agenda. Now, coming back to your question, yes, there is this issue of 100 years, but if you were to look at different regions, there is a wide variety. And when we take the Middle East and North Africa, we are at the bottom 25 percentile, which means that we need more than 150 years to get to the gender parity if we keep the same policies as we have today. And therefore, the answer to you is policies. There is a large room for policies here. And when I talk about policies, I would also mention two types of policies. First, for the region itself, job creation, women and men. For men and women, it is very important. So there is a need for broader policies to boost growth and job creation in the region. But beyond that, this will not be enough for women. It will be also important to have specific policies targeted at women to provide equal opportunities. And we have spoken about equal opportunities for education, for financial access, including also legal barriers for instance, inheritance law or asset ownership, and then additional measures to facilitate the balancing between work and family.
So it's about governance, it's about policy, it's about making the numbers add up, and frankly, it's also about being beyond a moral imperative, isn't it? It's also about a national security imperative as well. It's about a foreign policy imperative for every country. Zohra, walk us through this within the UN's context.
Thanks, Hadley, and also thanks to the organizers. I think that's such a critical question for where we are in society today. It's 2020, it's 25 years after the Beijing Platform for Action was adopted, and UN Women has just now done an extensive review. We've got country reports from 166 countries to look at what works for gender equality and what doesn't. And I think I just want to build on the previous speaker's point that really one underlying sticky issue that seems to be stopping us, I think, from achieving gender equality is really social norms and cultural perceptions. And it permeates all aspects of life. It permeates all types of countries, advanced economies, developing economies, and so on. And I just want to cite a few key findings from the report. So much progress has been made, of course, but violence against women. So more than 3/4 of countries have laws on domestic violence, yet violence against women remains prevalent, with 18% of women having experienced domestic violence in the last 12 months. The gender gap in labor force participation is at 31%, and it's stagnated over the last 2 decades. Only 26% of AI and data professionals globally are women. And in politics, whilst we have made huge gains with many more women entering the political domain, parity in decision-making is a long way off. Men still hold 3/4 of seats in single or lower houses of parliaments, and while several states have gender balance in cabinets, they don't have parity across government.
So we got a long way to go.
Everything. It's all about social norms. It's all about cultural perceptions of what women's roles in societies are and what men's roles in societies are.
So one of the things, obviously, that we've been very much focused on, and frankly, when you're coming from a news medium, perception is 9/10 of any story. And there's an opportunity there for women, and particularly folks from the UAE, given how quickly you've managed to get to gender parity, how quickly you've done that, and how, frankly, securely you've done that within the context of the country. That's an opportunity to influence what happens externally. And I wonder if your excellencies want to pick up on that, because it's a shining example, not just for the region, but more globally. Obviously, you can't take everything and apply it everywhere, but it's an opportunity to frankly shine.
Sure. Maybe from my side, I'll speak, and then maybe Shamsa can relate to. We don't think of ourselves as different entities working for the UAE government. In other countries, they have parties. So it's the Labour Party, the Democratic Party, the Republicans, the Liberals, and so on. We have one party only in the UAE, and that's called the UAE. So we all work for one purpose, that is the UAE to win. We don't care if our Labour Party wins and the Liberals loses. And this is when it's a bigger purpose.
You've been able to take politics out of the equation.
Party and my gang. We are all one group that is trying to serve one particular vision. And the vision is to advance in each and every single sector. One of the sector is actually gender. And believe me when I say this, Hanley, and Shamsa knows this and many people know this. When we work together, we don't think about the other person being male or female. I work with people, and I only think of them as human capital and talented people. It does not cross my mind what's their gender. Therefore, that thing is not there. But when we saw the reports coming out, some of the reports would rank us really, performing so well, and some of the reports middle, and some of the reports in the bottom. And I'll give examples of best and low, so that we're very transparent. So in the Gender Inequality Index by the United Nations, the UNDP, we ranked number 26 today. The leading Arab nation, performing so well across all the dimensions in that particular report. We're midway in other reports, but we were in the bottom, almost bottom, in the World Bank Women Business and the Law, which is a 100% report based on laws. Now, that report came out only last year. We were taken by surprise. It was more of a shock to the whole society.
That more has to be done.
Not only more has to be done, it's about the perception outside. It's about us telling the stories. It's about communication. We have 9 lady ministers, more than Germany, more than the UK, more than the United States of America, more than so many OECD countries. So how on earth we will be the second bottom country when it comes to women business and the law? This was a shock. So we started analyzing. When it comes to parliament, we're 50% male, 50% female. The best OECD country is Sweden, 47.3. We're even ahead of the OECD average. So when reports came out, such as the Women Business and Law, we were shocked.
You knew you had a PR problem.
But immediately we started mobilizing resources and we started looking. You know what was the mistake? Our laws were created in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, and we never looked back. We never opened our drawers, checked in our cabinets. What did the law say at that time? Shamsa drives a very nice car, I think. Okay? She has a driving license, and she never asked for a permission from a male sibling or guardian or whatever. She also gets her passport renewed, and she gets it without taking any permission. But what did our laws say? Still, you need to take permission. So last year, we deleted all these laws, and here I would like to thank actually the mother of the nation, Her Highness Sheikh Fatima bint Mubarak and her team. And I also would like to thank the Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the president of the UAE, who gave us something that would never be given by any president in any country. 9 laws and 9 decrees were signed in a span of 3 weeks.
That's really impressive.
This is, of course, there were the cabinet, there was the Office of His Highness, the Prime Minister of the UAE, so many ministers were involved, but for a president to understand the compelling reasons to advance something in 3 weeks, in other countries, because it's a different system, they will take 2 to 3 years to evaluate one law.
Or even longer, potentially.
Or even longer. So
but I want to kick you off one question.
Sure.
Move it over quickly to the IMF, actually, and just one way in which we can get around other governments that might not actually be able to move so fast, whether it be for cultural reasons or others. Yeah. When you think about this from the IMF perspective, there are ways that one can do this through the back door, if you will. When you go into a country that's in economic distress, Egypt, for example, Pakistan, Jordan, elsewhere, there is an ability for the IMF to make sure that the reforms that they want this government to put in place allow for women in the workplace, allow for reforms towards women, whether it be in home life or elsewhere. That's a backdoor that a country that perhaps that doesn't have the government of the UAE can actually use to achieve gender parity.
Yes, indeed. We work very closly with countries to advance this agenda. For the IMF, gender equality is macro-critical, and therefore it is very, very important that we convey this message to our country authorities, and we help them when we support measures to advance this agenda. Now, there are 2 types of assistance or advice that we could have. One is in surveillance cases where we go and discuss and provide policy advice to countries. We focus on gender equality issues. We identify gaps in that particular country. We have done so for instance, in Algeria, in Morocco, in several other countries. And and we provide them specific advice on how they can advance and what does it mean to advance economically, to advance on gender issues. The second aspect is where we have lending to countries, and there, I mean, people know that when the countries are in a difficult situation and they need some support from the IMF goes there and discuss with the country authorities their policies. And an important element for us is the inclusion there, and gender equality also comes in. For instance, in the case of Egypt or Pakistan or Jordan, there were some measures in the IMF program about providing cash transfers to the poor, but to women, and these were targeted, and also to help countries with build childcare and provide women with childcare. So we have also done other measures, for instance, in the case of Pakistan, having some specific measure on women's financial inclusion.
So it's basically about being able to turn a crisis into an opportunity and do it via economic assistance, which is very, very hard to turn down when your country's in the middle of economic distress. So it's a way to really, in some ways, use that backdoor policy to help women.
Indeed, but it is also because people suffer during this period and the vulnerables need to be supported. And most of the times, a large majority of these vulnerable people are women, and therefore support to women is very, very important.
Secretary General, I want to bring you in on this. Your Excellency, when you think about this a bit more broadly within the context of the UAE and achieving this gender balance, one of the things that we talk about a lot on CNBC is the difference between corporates and the private sector, essentially, and the public sector. How do you encourage businesses, other than financial kickbacks, to allow women into these higher roles, in these managerial roles? Because it's easy to do it when it's a top-down society and you can do it in the public sector, but getting the private sector on board can be much more difficult. How do you lead by example there?
So I'd like to add on what His Excellency Abdullah just said. The partnership is very important, especially between private and government sector. When we introduce or change any policy of law, we need to ensure it's changed across the board. For example, the equal wage. When we introduced the equal wage, we made sure that it's implemented across the government and private. And we had earlier conversation with the private sector as well, and we got their buy-in. So it was not mandatory on them, it was based on discussion. And we showed them what is the impact of having equal wage in the workplace. It increased, it attracts talent, increase more productivity and loyalty of male and female in the workplace.
It's a win-win.
So yeah, so I think having this discussion with the private sector on the importance of engaging women. For instance, we have one of our biggest aerospace engineering company, Strata. They have the highest number of women enrollment. 90% of their national staff are women who are aerospace engineers and work like in the factory. So I think the private sector is open for change, but what we need to do to have that partnership and give them the enablers that the government is working with you. We are not isolated from each other. Again, the partnership with the global organization is really important as well. So we are working here in the UAE, but we really don't know what are the gaps that we have when it comes to, outsider perspective. We know, the gaps that we have internally, but when it comes to global standards, we really need to have that connection with them to identify the gap. Even when we come to do the reforms, we really need their input in the reforms. We might do the reforms, but not in the way that it's globally
mandated.
known. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the partnership is very important, whether it's globally or locally.
Just to build on what Shamsa said, I think these are some of the moments where we disagree. We really disagree, but these are some of the things. Sometimes we think about what we want to do as a nation. Stakeholders are very important. One of the main stakeholders is the private sector. It's the largest employer. They contribute so much to the GDP. And as government, we're here to serve the different stakeholders, the citizens, the civil society, the academia, and the private sector. So making them aware is one of the steps we need to do, is always make them aware of what you're doing and what you are aspiring to do. make sure that you engage with them as you create policies, or you're about to create a policy, or to launch a law, or to start an initiative. It's good to engage because they have so many creative stories that they can share. I mean, I worked for Microsoft for 8 years. Engaging with Microsoft or the likes of A'mar Properties or the likes of, the First Abu Dhabi Bank in your dialogue as a government, it's going to make things only richer and more creative and more robust. So engage is very important. The last step, and it's more of a life cycle, is actually to maintain a very positive relationship with the private sector. Never exclude them. Always make sure that you're including them in the dialogue to reform and achieve gender balance and gender equality. Those people are just humans like us. Yes, we have certain KPIs and a vision, and we want to advance as a nation. They have the P&L at the end of the day, and they have shareholders. The dollar sign or the dirham sign, it's very important on the 31st of December of every year. We need to understand some of their limitations, and they need to know what we are inspired to do. And I think by working together, we can achieve great stories within the private sector. And there are some really amazing stories in the private sector, which we as government should celebrate. Many of us actually look at the bad stories or the negative stories, and we get diluted, and we cannot see the beautiful achievements in company X or company Y. The video that we saw yesterday celebrating the firefighter and the pilot and the ice skater, and this is inspiring stories by individuals that I didn't know half of them that they existed. So it's about sharing these stories, and the private sector has a role to do more advocacy.
No doubt about it. I mean, frankly, it's about influencing, doesn't it? And I'm sorry if you want to weigh in terms of how you take that kind of message more globally within the context of the UN, because it's a much bigger picture, and you've got I would say, a steeper hill to climb.
It's a much bigger picture, and I'd like to just come back to the other point about the backdoor, front door strategy that you raised earlier on, because I think that the backdoor strategy that you refer to is sometimes not as sustainable as a strategy that comes from the bottom up. And what's very interesting about what we're seeing in terms of reforms that countries are pushed towards adopting sometimes is that they're not sustainable, they don't last, because they're not driven by governments themselves. And I think this came up yesterday in one of the opening sessions. It's incredibly important, particularly in this region, for citizens' voices to be heard. Governments absolutely need to be listening to citizens and understanding what citizens' needs are. So that's the one thing. As for the private sector and companies, from the UN perspective, absolutely critical players. The private sector employs people. So whether we're talking about an SME or a large corporation, they are employees of people and have a critical role to advance gender equality within their own structures, but also in the world or in countries more broadly. As the UN, we subscribe to human rights standards, of course, and we want to see a private sector that's responsive, that's responsible, that upholds human rights standards across the world. And I think that's very, very important. So in whatever interaction states have with the private sector in terms of FDI and so on, it has to be one that's based on human rights principles. I think that's incredibly important from a gender equality perspective.
Absolutely. I think the sustainability element is key there. When you think about this from an economic perspective as well, in terms of the IMF, front door, back door, whatever way you want to look at it, we still got a long way to go. And I just wonder from your perspective, when you look at economies, not just in this region, but more globally, that are struggling, not just to find gender parity, but also to, frankly, evolve quick enough for things that we're seeing in terms of manufacturing, technology, changing the landscape, even in the United States, in developed economies, we're seeing these challenges. How are we going to change the workforce for the jobs that are going to become available? How do you see that evolving? Because technology can do a lot, AI can do a lot, but it can't do everything when it comes to making equality across the board.
No, I want to come back to the point about backdoor on the front door. I agree that it is very important for policies to be designed and adopted, and there is by the country authorities and by the government, and there is ownership and commitment, and this is a very important thing for sustainability of policies. And so that, even when there are measures in fund programs or else, or in our discussions, these measures come after discussions from country authorities. So that is a very important issue. Coming back to the point of technology, I mean, the technological development is going to provide opportunities, but it's going to create also challenges. So for the world in itself. And so it is very important that we adapt to these changes, we prepare well for this, and try to see how we can maximize the benefits, but at the same time reduce the risks and mitigate the risks. And particularly, I mean, there is a big issue for the inequality aspect, particularly when we think about the low-skilled people. And this is where the issue of education and the adaptation of education comes very much of importance.
Because when you think about it on the face of it, when we talk about unlocking $12 trillion by 2025 in terms of the global economy, and when we talk about scaling businesses, when we talk about changing the roles of women across the world, it seems like a no-brainer that when you would go to a government and discuss with them the opportunities that are inherent when you employ women and when you make women not just part of government, but also part of the private sector. Isn't that just a win-win for everybody? I mean, what do you think is the thing that holds people back? Because when you can tell them it's going to affect your bottom line, it's going to make everybody's lives better, how can then governments refuse to move on that?
I think, indeed, I mean, the IMF sees this as an important issue, and we have integrated the gender issue in all parts of our work. First, I mean, what we do, and it is very important to convince the authorities and the world of the importance of this issue. So we raise awareness. And how do we do that? I mean, you've seen yesterday our managing director, and at the highest level, there is communication about the economic importance of gender issues from the IMF. The second point is the deepening of our analytical agenda. And there, I mean, we have done a lot of work where we show the impact of improving gender equality on growth, on improving economic resilience in countries, on financial stability. And also yesterday we have launched a paper that talks about gender-responsive fiscal policies and their impact on gender equality. So this is the analytical work, the numbers, and the work itself talks a lot, and it helps countries understand and recognize the need to do this work. At the same time, I mean, we also work directly with countries, as I mentioned earlier, and we help identify the issues in their particular countries. I think the raising awareness, showing what does it mean to make the changes is the answer to your questions. And indeed, the progress we are seeing is very, very encouraging in the world.
Do you want to pick on that?
Yeah. I think I do respect the global organizations, and I work with them very closely. I've been in my role for the last 10 years. I worked for international organizations, as I said, and I know the mentality, and I know how they operate to a good extent, maybe not to the perfect extent. I think the challenge we have is, if you look around you, you have lots of UAE nationals here, lots of ladies, lots of boys. Shamsa and I care for them definitely more than the three of you do. We have to believe so. If I'm in the US, I would never care for an American citizen or for a British citizen as much as an American or a British citizen would care for his or her people. The challenge we face sometimes with global organizations, based on perception or based on someone sitting in one of the cities around the world, they see something on YouTube, they see something in the media, and boom, perception or a negative story becomes a reality, and then they start creating a story around it. Now, one of the things we face as a challenge, honestly, once you get into the ranking game, once you get into positioning and classifying countries, you're basically naming and shaming. We're not school children.
We need some of that, though, don't we?
We need that, but
certainly
not
we do.
we're not school children to be told by a headmaster or a teacher, you're doing good, you're doing bad, you're going to be punished, you're not going to be punished, you're an A student. Because we are countries we're very proud of what we've achieved. We're super proud. Therefore, I think what we expect is actually more respect and more courtesy. I was having a discussion.
But what kind of international metric then would you suggest?
Let me explain. I'll answer this one. So I have an example of women, business, and the law by the World Bank Group. The 9 decrees or the 9 laws we passed, one of the decrees that were rejected was getting equal rights by male and female when they ask for credit from financial institutions. This was a request coming from the World Bank team. I said, no problems, I'll get this done. I got the governor of the central bank saying a statement, men and women are equal before the law as they ask for financial services. Do you have a problem with that statement?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would have a problem with that statement.
I had one person from the World Bank saying unaccepted. This is in Dubai. Me, my team, 2 people from the World Bank, 1 lady. She said unaccepted. I said, why? She said, you should use, there is no discrimination between men and female before the law. So I said, what does equal mean? It's just another word for discrimination. There is no discrimination, or men and female are equal. She said unaccepted. So I said, it's okay, leave it. I swear. And I have witnesses, and I have the World Bank. Another meeting with 2 World Bank guys in Washington, and that lady was not there. I said, why do you think this will be rejected? She said, because you said financial institutions. I said, okay, what's missing? She said, you should have said retailers such as supermarkets.
Do you think if you'd had a lawyer in the room, it would have been easier?
The first one was a lawyer. I should have taken a lawyer with me. But listen to this. It's ironic and funny. This is how we get ranked. The second person said, unaccepted. You should have added retailers and supermarkets. I said, but we, in our country, people do not go to a supermarket to borrow money. She said, but other societies. But you cannot compare my society with other societies with all my... She said, it will not be accepted. I said, it's okay. Last year, we hosted a big event here, 500 people from the World Bank coming. One of the best events. Anyone from the World Bank? Hello? Maybe we saw you in Dubai. So I have the seniors here. And none of the... Not number 1, the discrimination equal was there. Not the supermarket lady was there. And I said, why do you think this will be rejected? She said, because everything's correct, but you did not say what will be the punishment if that's not practiced. I went bananas there. I called the most senior staff from the World Bank. I said, now in the lobby of the hotel. I swear. My team was there. I said, listen, answer number 1, 3 months ago was this. Answer number 2, why it will be rejected, was this. Answer number 3, and here we are, is this. Do you guys communicate? Can you deal with us as a respectful country? Have one voice, one view. If you did this to the UAE, what do you do for the other nations? You drive them crazy. How can we please you guys?
Roll in on this one, Zohra, because I have to say, from the UN
no, that's
perspective...
The UN woman.
No, but I'm curious. I'm really curious.
But the World Bank would relate to this one.
No, but walk us through that, because obviously, you were talking about all of these different countries as part of the United Nations. Obviously, everyone's coming at this from a different angle, but no doubt about it.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
And I also see conflict of interest big time. You tell me I'm bad, and behind the closed door, you come and say, I have advisory services for $1 million. I can tell you how to become better. So basically, honestly,
this entire experience for you has made you called into question global institutions.
Global institutions, if you are into this and you're genuine, why don't you do it for free? Why don't you do capacity building? Why don't you do capacity? Don't do it for free. Why don't you do capacity building? I'll send my people to work for the World Bank legal team, and they will work. I'll pay for it, but they will get trained for free.
Yeah.
How about that? But do not come knocking on the other door and say, here is a $5 million deal, here is a $1 deal.
I think that would be rampant and obvious corruption. Go ahead.
So we do build capacity, at least we try. So, you know, this is an interesting conversation because as you were talking, Excellency, I was thinking about an intergovernmental setting. So as the UN, we uphold global norms and standards, but these are not global norms and standards that we invent. These are global norms and standards that member states agree to. And the 2030 Agenda is one such standard. So it's a process of negotiation that all member states, including the UAE, have gone through over a period of a number of years to come up with these agreed goals. Within these agreed goals, you have a monitoring framework with SDG indicators that monitor progress across all countries. And, you know, in order for us to have comparable data across country, you need to be clear about the definitions and the standards. And I hear the pain and the agony, and I can understand how difficult that must be from a reporting perspective. But it becomes very difficult for us to sit in fora like this and say 20% of this is happening in the world, or 31% is a gender gap in labor force participation. We wouldn't be able to make those claims if we didn't have accurate data to stand by. And therefore, the definitions and how we go into the indicators defining particular things becomes very, very important for us. So I think what I'm hearing and a lesson for us, international institutions, is really to be more cognizant of national realities. And I think we are, I think we do, or we try in our country capacity building and so on, and also to introspect. And I think that's a healthy thing for anyone to do.
We just have a few minutes left, and I want to get the perspectives from each of you about. We talked about that number, a century to get to gender parity. That's just not fast enough for anyone in this room, I think. Give us your thoughts on how we need to move the dial forward here quickly, because it can't just be a top-down approach for every country. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But walk us through, Zohra, if you want to kick off, just how you feel we could go faster today.
For us at UN Women, it's completely unacceptable to wait for gender equality. I have a daughter who's sitting in the audience. I'm not going to let her experience inequality the way I have. She needs to live her life to her best and fullest potential. UN Women has just launched Generation Equality, and our strapline is that equality between men and women is possible in this generation. So we don't have to be looking at 1,000 years from now or whatever. And I think, with all that we've discussed about the UAE, you can see what a difference political will makes. If you're even willing to change laws rapidly and policies rapidly in order to make advancements on gender equality, that's the kind of leadership we want to see. But it also has to come from the bottom up. So we need people. And our generation equality is focused very much on young people, because they're the leaders of tomorrow. They are going to be shaping the planet. It's not us. And we feel that it's important to give space to young people. We've also identified 7 critical areas for action. Climate change is one of them, technology, economic empowerment, ending violence against women, leadership and feminist movement building, and sexual and reproductive health and rights. And we think those 6 areas can really galvanize action and momentum towards achieving gender equality.
Taline, weigh in here, because an audience, a CNBC audience, if you explain to them that you're going to make more money if you do it this way, it's a no-brainer for an audience of investors. And it should frankly be a no-brainer for governments around the world when they realize that they can benefit their societies by bringing women into the fore.
Yes, and I have to say that, yes, there is this 100 years issue, but if the same policies continue the same way. Now, when we look at the World Bank, the Women Business and Law indicators, and we see the fastest progress that has been done, 1/3 of the countries who made the fastest progress are from this region, which means that progress is advancing and is accelerating, and there is a way to accelerate that progress. And therefore, raising awareness is a very important issue. I can understand some definitions that needs to be really done properly. At the same time, I wouldn't say it's just about the classification, but the way UAE sees that, okay, on paper, the laws are outdated, but in reality, they're not applying, but it makes everybody address the issues. Another point I want to raise, and this is a dry issue, is the statistics. And there also, one needs to have more gender disaggregated data. We in the IMF have started to collaborating in the 2016 Financial Access Survey to build more the gender disaggregated data on women's financial inclusion. Because if you don't know what is happening, how much progress is taking place, how can you address it? So this measurement is also a very important issue.
So data-driven approach.
Yeah.
I think we need to have a clear, transparent and honest dialogue with the global organizations on identifying our needs as well. So when they set methodologies and indicators, they should consider the circumstances of our region, not just specific regions. So when they put certain indicators that's really not applicable for us, like women in agriculture, we don't have agriculture as a sector here. So how do you measure us on the women in agriculture? So I think we should have that dialogue to come up with agreement on the indicators and methodology and unify scheme for the whole world. Today, the problem is that these indicators serve some countries where other countries are advancing and suffering from, you know, the look, and they look really bad. I'll just give you an example. One of the Far East countries ranked top 10 in the Global Gender Gap Report, and we ranked 120. So when you see the reality in this country, I see the difference, and even women did not reach their basic rights, where today we have 50% women representation in the parliament, 30% in the ministerial level. So I think this should be rectified and the dialogue should be open.
And just to sort of close out with you, Abdullah, when you think about this within the context of the power of influence, obviously there's a big disconnect, you're telling me, between what the reality is on the ground and what potentially international organizations are allowing for. How do you see the UAE moving the dial forward globally on this? Because it can't just be a problem that's specific to you guys. If it's happening with the UAE, it's definitely happening with other countries. So using that influence that you have, how can you move the dial forward?
I think one of the things that we are aware of is that we live in the Middle East, and there are lots of unpleasant things happening around us in this region, but there is always hope. And I keep referring to the hope. I keep referring to the things that we should celebrate, whether in the UAE or Saudi or Egypt or Morocco. We should celebrate these moments, because without hope we will not be advancing. I think one of the things that we are really intending to, we know that the potential is there, not only from the female, but also from our boys. It's the boys and girls that are the future of these nations. This is the youth. So we need to ensure that they have equal rights. We need to ensure that they have equal opportunities. We need to ensure that they are fully equipped with the right education, with the right surroundings, in order for them to achieve their potential. Now, what's happening on the ground, based on data, sometimes we face challenges where some of the boys and the girls do not feel that they have equal rights. And I know that there is a loss of opportunities when it comes to women participation in the workforce in the UAE. But we understand it, and we have the justification. Someone from outside won't relate. We're a country that is we've been building this nation with our leaders and with all the people that have been living here for the last, since 71.
Is there an opportunity for expats to in some ways be your greatest advocates here in this sense? I mean, in terms of the power of influence, they're going to not necessarily stay here forever, they're going to go home, and within that context, their involvement is really important, and their buy-in.
Many of the expats actually consider this place home. Many of them speak about this place with so much passion, and this is the country that gave them an opportunity, that gave them safety, security, a livelihood for their children, which their mother nations did not provide them. So many people know that this is the place where they flourished with their children, and they want to give back. And we've seen it. Many of them became ambassadors for the nation. They speak, they promote the nation, and they ensure that whatever is perceived by the West is actually, there is a story that goes against it by them. I think this is the power of influence. We've seen it from lots of people. They've been living here. I have a very good friend of mine, a retired friend, a very famous guy. Many people know him, Mark Beer from DIFC Courts, the registrar. well reputable. He went back to the UK, and I think he's more Emirati than me at times, honestly. And he keeps having a dialogue with me. He says, anything that you want. I actually run thoughts and ideas by him while he's sitting in his cottage house in a farmland in the UK. Now, to know that there is someone out there who does not share my color, he's definitely much whiter, he's much taller, he's blonde, he has hair, I don't have any hair, he's sophisticated, I'm more passion, I'm on fire, but we share one thing. We know that the UAE has so many good things which we don't communicate to the world. So sometimes he actually puts together presentations with me on the phone to promote it. And this is someone who does not share.
He's your producer.
He is my devil's advocate, he's my advisor, he's my buddy. You can call him whatever, but he's someone who would tell me, Abdullah, you're wrong, and I will accept it. Different backgrounds, different religion, different way of eating, different ways of dressing. But it's how we mingle, how we talk to each other. Respect. He lived here and he respected the nation as it came. He accepted it as a package. And I think this is very important.
Panelists, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And thank to all of you in the audience as well.
Thank you. Thank you.